the cuts that RFK Jr. Announced today to the Department of Health and Human Services, which is just the latest example of Elon Musk and Donald Trump trying to decimate important services for the American people. And that's what we're here to talk about today, but we're also here to talk about legislation that we're introducing to address this issue. And I'm pleased to team up in this effort with my House colleagues here, including the principal author of the bill, Congressman Subramanyam. Thank you for your leadership here. This was a piece of legislation I had introduced during the first Trump administration with Congresswoman Wexton. We hoped it wouldn't be necessary again, but it is. And it's necessary in order to stop Donald Trump and Elon Musk from wasting American taxpayer dollars by sabotaging services that the American public depends on. One of the big lies is that the Musk operation is about making the government more efficient. That is not true. It is about making the government work better for people like Elon Musk. We've seen how they're illegally firing thousands of federal employees. The good news is the courts have been stepping in to blow a whistle on that. They're also trying to hollow out important federal agencies like the Veterans Administration that provides important services to our veterans, like the Social Security Administration that helps deliver Social Security benefits to 73 million Americans. And part of their plan, and this is laid out in Project 2025 and other places, is to try to decimate the federal government and the services it provides to Americans all over the country by essentially moving agencies, important federal agencies, out of the capital region. Their goal there, we should be clear, is to coerce, pressure federal employees who work in those agencies into quitting. And when you do that, you of course lose enormous expertise and you lose the important services that those individuals are providing. This was tried on a minor scale during the first Trump administration. Eleanor will remember this too, as well as my colleagues here from Virginia, because in the first Trump administration, they closed down the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, which is at the Department of Agriculture, the Economic Research Service, and the Bureau of Land Management. They moved those functions over 1,000 miles away. And they forced people to make a decision. Are you going to uproot your families in order to make that move? And their calculation was that a lot of families wouldn't, because their ultimate goal was not to improve the services, but to destroy those services. And in fact, most employees decided not to relocate. So we've had a real-world example of this already. And as a result, the ability of those agencies to carry out their functions was severely undermined and in many cases destroyed. And if you had any doubt as to what their purpose was, you just had to listen to the quote from the former Trump chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, who was at once also a member of Congress, who said, quote, "It's a wonderful way," unquote, to cut the federal workforce. So this was not about improving services or making them more efficient and less costly. It was about cutting the federal workforce. And in fact, a nonpartisan report by the Government Accountability Office criticized the move and talked about how it did severely impair those important public services. So now they're talking about moving 100,000 federal jobs out of Washington, D.C. And again, this is part of their Project 2025 plan. It will be orchestrated by the OMB director, Vogt, who, as we all know, said he wanted to impose, quote, trauma on the federal workforce. So this is part of the Trump-Musk Vogt plan to impose trauma on the federal workforce. We're here because we want to make sure that before that happens, we ask ourselves some simple questions. It's common sense. Is it actually going to improve services? Is it actually going to be cost effective? And That is why Congresswoman Wexton and I introduced that bill back in the first Trump administration. It's needed more than ever right now, and we should be getting those answers. The American taxpayers deserve answers to those questions before they make a very costly move that will jeopardize and sabotage the services provided to the American people. So we have a challenge to the Trump-Musk administration. If you're really saying that this is about a government efficiency, provide Congress with a report that shows that this will be cost effective and shows that this will not result in a reduction of services for the American people. We don't expect that they're going to do it because that's not their purpose. And so we're here to blow the whistle on what's happening. And I just want to, again, thank all my colleagues who are here and making this effort together. My Senate colleagues, Senator Alsobrooks, Senator Kaine, Senator Warner, wanted to be here. They can't be here, but they are totally in support of this effort. So now let me turn it over to my partner in this effort, Congressman Subramanyam.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. As we stand here today, the Trump administration is asking federal agencies to draw up plans to relocate agencies outside of the D.C. region. And they claim doing so will save taxpayers money. But as we've seen before with other initiatives like DOGE, this has nothing to do with making government more efficient or cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. Instead, there will be disruption and chaos and the targeting of federal workers, and it will be the American people and working families who end up footing the bill. We know this because during the first Trump administration, they abruptly relocated to USDA agencies to Kansas City in the name of cost savings. And employees at these agencies were given 33 days to decide whether to lose their job or uproot their families. And unsurprisingly, nearly half of the agency's workforce departed, a significant brain drain in our government. Experienced staff at these agencies, those with at least 2 years on the job, declined 83% in 2018 to 27% in 2021. And this had real impacts on the American people. Grants for nutrition assistance and food safety were months late in being delivered, and important agricultural research was severely cut or discontinued altogether. And that's part of the plan. Former White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney suggested that the moving of the agency outside the D.C. region was an effective way to get staff to quit, as the senator said. And now the second Trump administration is using that strategy on steroids, having directed all federal agencies to submit relocation plans by April 14th, and we will not stand for it. If these plans occurred across other agencies, it won't just be grants getting delayed. American families instead will suffer. And we cannot afford to wait months to have their benefits delivered because an agency was recklessly moved halfway across the country. American families will not be better off if we decimate critical health and safety agencies with poorly planned relocations. And so today, we are here to introduce the COST of Relocations Act, common sense legislation that will require any agency that plans to relocate to conduct a comprehensive cost-benefit analysis and share it with Congress and the general public. And my colleagues and I are here today from all over the DMV because these relocations would be devastating to our local economy. But it's not just our constituents who will be hurt, it'll be all American people. And if you're going to relocate a federal agency and disrupt the services it provides to the public for several years, you should justify it to the American taxpayer and to Congress. Before I hand it off, I'd like to thank many people. Senator Van Hollen, thank you so much for your leadership on this. I want to thank my predecessor, Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton, for her leadership on this issue for many years. And we appreciate the support of several organizations who champion responsible and transparent governance, including the American Federation of Government Employees, the Union of Concerned Scientists, the Project on Government Oversight, and the Partnership for Public Service, and the Citizens for Responsible Ethics in Washington. So thank you so much for being here. I want to pass it along to Congressman Steny Hoyer.
Thank you very much, Suhas. Chris, thank you. Don, thank you too.
Thank you, Steny.
And all of my colleagues who are here. I'm so pleased to be here. I was a few minutes late. I was doing a press thing, and all of you understand that we got a lot of press to deal with. But I'm here with my colleagues, and I want to say to you, Congress after Congress, after administration have decided the way you can make government more efficient is to make sure that there is a center core of administration of our government services. And by the way, large businesses have decided the same thing for efficiency's sake. Now, of course, they want to disperse government all around the country. They should know government is dispersed all over the country. But whatever they want to do with those dispersed offices, like Social Security offices, which serve people in their communities, they want to shut them down. They want to eliminate them. So they're at cross purposes with themselves. Like much of the Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and Doge, which is a fancy name, have done these past few months, have pledged to move 100,000 people out of Washington. Federal workers out of the capital region is not about efficiency. My two colleagues have mentioned Mick Mulvaney, a former member of the House of Representatives and OMB director, who said it clearly. It was one of the best ways to reduce numbers, not to disperse them so that they could serve the American people, just get rid of them. Rather, it's part of a plan that Trump's OMB director, Russell Vought, described just over a year ago. Now, he's been quoted by Senator Van Hollen, but let me give you the full quote that he said in a private meeting, in a non-transparent meeting. He said, "We want the bureaucrats," used as an epithet, not as a descriptor, "to be traumatically affected." Senator Van Hollen made that part of the quote. But here's what he went on to say in that private meeting. "When they wake up in the morning, we want them not to want to go to work because they are increasingly viewed as villains." That, ladies and gentlemen, is the secret, but so apparent, objective of their acts. Vought went on to say, "We want their funding to be shut down. We want to put them," as Suhas said, "in trauma." Well, they're accomplishing that objective. And so in the pursuit of efficiency, what they've done is every federal employee is now so worried about their own job, they're not looking at the job we want them to do. And we are getting thousands of calls from people who they have successfully traumatized. They want to force federal workers to uproot their lives, to take their children out of school, to sell their homes, to break their leases, all with little or no advance notice. The administration wants to isolate workers and agencies to make it harder for them to coordinate and fulfill their mission under law. Doing so makes our government less, not more efficient. This administration claims these relocations will cut down on costs. This legislation will require them to prove that when they're traumatizing and making people move. Now, the reality is they won't move. The reality is we will lose hundreds of years of experience, hundreds of years of people who have dedicated their lives to serving the American people. This requires them to do so. And this requires them to do the math to show us that that's what, in fact, they're doing. Everyone standing here, every one of my colleagues, wants to get rid of fraud, waste, and abuse. Is that a worthy objective? Absolutely. But that rhetoric is a cover for an agenda that is perverse and contrary to the interests of the United States of America. If our colleagues across the aisle genuinely share that objective, they'll support this bill. And I thank my colleagues for introducing, fighting for it, and invite every Republican to join us in this effort for cost effectiveness in the federal government. Thank you very much. And now, Eleanor Holmes Norton, my colleague of more years than she wants me to tell you.
Thank you, Steny. I'm pleased to be here today to support Congressman Subramanyam's COST of Relocations Act, which would require federal agencies seeking to relocate to first conduct a cost-benefit analysis in accordance with federal guidelines. This legislation is a common sense step to avoid wasting taxpayer dollars and ensure potential relocations don't harm the agency's ability to provide high-quality services to taxpayers. The Trump administration is waging an open war against federal employees using illegal tactics to fire dedicated public servants without cause, and using intimidation, threats, and fear to force compliance with wasteful directives that demonstrate a deep-seated misunderstanding of how our government operates. In February, I introduced the Protecting Federal Agencies and Employee from Political Interference Act of 2025, which would require an agency of Congress before any federal agency located in the National Capital Region or any federal employee position with a duty station in the NCR may be located outside of the ACR. The Trump administration directed federal agencies to submit proposed relocations of agency bureaus and offices from the National Capital Region to other parts of the country. But moving federal agencies will only delay operations, lead to increased employee attrition, and disrupt vital services provided to Americans across the country. We can have a discussion on ways to make government more efficient, but politicians whose stated goal is to demonize and traumatize federal employees with these sweeping changes deserve skepticism their policies draw. Federal employees play a crucial role in keeping Congress informed of activities and ensuring the government runs effectively. For this reason, federal agencies should not be relocated sua sponte or without careful consideration. I strongly support Congressman Subramanyam's COST of Relocation Act. Thank you for inviting me to speak today, and I now turn it over to my long-term colleague, ally, and friend, Congressman Don Beyer.
Thanks, I promise I'll try to be short. All right. Well, look, thank you, Suhas, for organizing us, and thanks everybody for being here. My name is Jamie Raskin. I represent Maryland's beautiful 8th Congressional District, which is in Montgomery County, Maryland. I've got 55,000 federal workers and tens of thousands of federal retirees and other people who work in not-for-profits and businesses that are very closely aligned with the work of the federal government. When this nightmare started back in January, the first message they got was the so-called fork in the road memo, which was taken verbatim from the memo that Elon Musk had sent to the workers at Twitter. And it basically said you can take your chances staying here, knowing that they're trying to dismantle the federal workforce, or you can take a 9-month paid vacation. They basically offered 2 million federal workers a 9-month paid vacation and then their departure, their exit from the federal workforce, which shows you what kind of spectacular disrespect they have for the federal government and for the people who've come to serve it. Okay, so the next thing that happens is the vast majority of them say no. They're going to stay. They want to do their jobs. They want to continue to serve the American people in the federal government. So then they begin massive layoffs, almost all of them completely illegal. For example, they got rid of tens of thousands of federal workers who were in a probationary status. They were on probation not because they'd done anything wrong. They were on probation because they'd done everything right. Either they'd just been hired, or in the case of a lot of my constituents, they'd been promoted because they had superior evaluations in their work. And they fired all those people, but the courts have restored most of them, not all of them, restored most of them to their jobs. Well, now, as part of this continuing attack on the federal government and attack on the federal workforce, they're starting to try to relocate federal offices and installations outside of the national capital area, to move them to other parts of the country. So imagine you've just been through all of these attacks on your job, all of these efforts to get you out of your job, and now they say, we want you to move 2,000 miles away, you and your family, and you don't know if you're going to have any job security once you get there. And so you see how all of this is targeted at depleting the federal workforce and nullifying the government of the United States. And that is the philosophy that is driving this entire thing. So the very least we can do is pass this legislation, which says before any federal agency or entity gets relocated to another part of the country, live up to your promise. Make it pass a cost-benefit analysis. Show us it's really going to save money and produce more efficiency. Because I think it's going to be a lot more like what's going on with Social Security today. Nobody ever really thought about the efficiency of Social Security before. It's much less than 1% of the overall Social Security budget that goes to administration. And every once in a while, people have problems. Our staffs are able to go to bat for people and get their Social Security benefits. The system has worked up until Donald Trump and Elon Musk got involved. Now it's impossible to get through on the phones. There's mass confusion about Social Security benefits. You can't get through on the phones. They say, go to the offices, but they're closing the offices around the country. If Vladimir Putin had tried to dismantle and destroy Social Security, he could not be doing a better job than Donald Trump and Elon Musk are doing right now. So they say it's about waste, fraud, and abuse. Well, the first thing they did was they sacked 18 inspectors general whose job it is to ferret out waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. They saved us $91 billion last year, the real corruption fighters. Elon Musk hasn't saved us $91. He's taken $38 billion in government contracts, and now he gets to oversee his own contracts. These people are not opponents of corruption. They are agents and instruments of corruption. And they're attacking our government. So we've got to pass this bill. Otherwise, they're going to be relocating everything. The White House is going to end up in Mar-a-Lago, and CIA will be located in the Kremlin before we're done with these people. And I'm delighted to bring up now my beloved colleague, Congressman Don Beyer from Virginia.
Yeah. I love coming after Jamie Raskin. So I'm Don Beyer from beautiful Virginia, the birthplace of democracy, the mother of presidents. And I am horrified by what Donald Trump and Elon Musk are doing here. You know, I was in business for a long, long time, been leadership for a long time. And the very first thing that a leader learns how to do is to inspire the people that he or she is supposed to lead. To build a culture where people feel that they're respected, that they get to work hard, that they're working on meaningful things. And what Donald Trump is doing and Elon Musk is doing is tearing cultures apart. They're making things so that they don't work at all. Social Security and much, much more. What they're doing is bad management and stupid leadership. The second simple point to make is, many of my colleagues have made already, it didn't save any money when they did it the first time. There was a GAO study, there's a third-party study. Just the cost of moving and the loss of all those people that knew their jobs really well just didn't work. So it's not going to work this time either. But the most important part for me is this is deeply personal. Not just because we have so many federal employees in all the districts we represent, but because most of these districts voted 80% for Kamala Harris, 80% for Hillary Clinton, 80% for Joe Biden. Donald Trump hates us. And his whole motion, unlike any other president in history, is to divide us, to pit half of America against the other half of America. He says Northern Virginia, suburban Maryland, Washington, D.C., these are people who didn't vote for me, so I'm going to destroy them as best I can, no matter what the impact is on the rest of Americans around the country. It's not going to work. We need presidents, we need leaders who bring us together, who end up using the best and brightest of us to serve all the rest of us. I can't tell you how many times we have heard on the House floor how Republican colleagues call federal workers People who've given up their lives in public service, people who make a fraction of what they could make in the private sector, they've called them nameless, faceless bureaucrats. Well, the nameless, faceless right now are the kids on DOGE who are destroying our country. The federal bureaucrats are people who've been through lots of vetting, lots of training, who live in our neighborhoods, and who go to work every day for us to make our country strong. And this is a tragedy, and it's a wonderful bill that Senator Van Hollen and Congressman Subramanyam have put together. Make them prove that this actually saves any money, because it will not work. Let me now introduce our favorite new freshman, wonderful former member of the Maryland General Assembly from Annapolis, Sarah Elfreth.
Thank you so much, Congressman Beyer. And I want to thank first my Senator Chris Van Hollen, and my friend and colleague, one of the best and brightest in the freshman class, Congressman Subramanyam, for championing this issue. I'll be very brief, because when I read this bill, it was very clear to me what the goal was. Like any good middle school algebra teacher, we're simply asking the federal government, the White House, to show us their math, show us their work, to make sure if they're claiming waste, fraud, and abuse, and they're claiming to want greater efficiency and effectiveness, show us how this works out for the American people, for the taxpayers, and ensure that we can continue to deliver the services that the American people pay for and expect every single day. It's very simple. It's very clear. I, too, call on our Republican colleagues, who I am sure are also here because they believe in government efficiency, but they also believe that their constituents deserve the same services that ours do. And we cannot deliver on those services with this type of chaos, arbitrary political retribution that we are seeing from this White House. Our constituents deserve better, the American people deserve better, and that is why I'm so proud to be a co-sponsor of this bill. And with that, I'll bring up another star of the freshman class, Congressman Vindman.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm proud to co-sponsor this bill being led by my colleague and friend, Congressman Subramanyam. I have 55,000 federal civil servants that work in my district, tens of thousands of active duty military, and many contractors. And look, the policies that we've seen towards the civil servants and the American people have been cruel, callous, inefficient, ineffective, and likely deadly. So a few examples. The callous part, obviously the intent here is to humiliate hardworking civil servants, make their lives unbearable so they quit their jobs. We've heard my colleagues talk about that. That's the intent here. But it's also callous to the American people. I met with scores of senior citizens last week in district, and they were extremely concerned about Social Security, the offices that are being closed, the services that are being reduced. That's callous to the American people. Another example, in my district, we have the largest veterans health clinic in the country that opened up in Fredericksburg just a few weeks ago, and I was proud to cut the ribbon with my colleagues on the Senate, Mark Warner and Tim Kaine. That facility is only 1/3 staffed. $350 million facility, 1/3 staffed. My constituent Ray, that was looking to have services at that clinic, now has to travel 50, 100 miles round trip to Richmond to get those services. These are the costs. On the national security side, I have 3 military installations. These cuts to the federal civil servant workforce, they're cutting decades of national security experience. Some pretty exquisite capabilities in the installations in my district are now lacking critical staff. That puts us at risk. And we've already seen that this administration has put the American people, service members, and the mission at risk this week just in Signalgate. But we're seeing that in slow motion with these cuts to the federal civil servants, the workforce, the buyout offers, all illegal, all callous, and likely deadly. Those are the stakes. And so I'm proud to stand here with my colleagues and co-sponsor this critical legislation that is not only protecting my constituents, the civil servants, but the American people that rely on those services that they get from these agencies and departments. So thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. We're happy to answer any questions. I think we agree that the Virginia delegation will take the easy ones and the Maryland the hard ones. So.
I know you mentioned 100,000 people potentially could be moved. Has the administration specified which agencies would actually be moved?
I think they're putting together a plan with the deadline of April 14th is the last we've heard, but they haven't specified any particular agencies. We know that some Republicans have been writing to the administration about agencies like NASA and wanting them to move it to their states, and the reasoning being they are red states that supported the president, so they should be moving it to reward these red states and retribution to blue states, for instance. I don't know if you want to add to that.
I want to make a comment on that because I think it is indicative of what's happened over the last 2 months. There clearly was a very well-planned, as our leader refers to, a flood the zone plan, which meant across the board we're going to do all this stuff. What they didn't obviously have a plan for is the consequences of what they would do. And that happened at Twitter, where they fired people. Then 30% of the people they fired, they had to have hired back because they found they needed them. So when you ask, is there a plan? I don't think there is a plan other than to reach a number. Remember, Musk said he was going to cut $2 trillion. That had no in touch with reality facet to it. So that when you ask us if they were going to sell 423 buildings, that may not be the exact figure, but over 400 billion. Then that figure quickly became 143. Now that list no longer exists. Why? Because they thought, well, we can sell everything. Then somebody said, well, if you do so, here's what happens. And they thought, boy, we ought to take that list back. So unfortunately, they know the assault they want to make, but they don't know the consequences.
Yeah, if I could just add, I mean, what they're leaving in place of these highly trained, experienced civil servants are political hacks with really their only qualifications being blind obedience and loyalty to the administration. And that's how we get to the situation that we saw earlier this week. We have completely unqualified, inexperienced people heading agencies in the national security establishment that at the very least have put the mission, a national security mission, at risk, and pilots' lives at risk, and zero accountability. It's just excuses without any accountability, and that is not government efficiency, that's government inefficiency.
Yeah, and even though they haven't moved any agencies yet, I want to say that we want to be proactive. We don't just want to be reactive to what this administration is doing. So this is us being proactive.
Suhas, could I make another comment?
Yes.
I got married 18 months ago. You may think that's irrelevant. And thank you very much.
That's just applause line.
My wife is a woman named Dr. Elaine Kmark. She ran Reinventing Government in the White House for the Clinton-Gore administration. Reduced federal employment to the lowest level it had been in decades. That's when Clinton said in his State of the Union, government is smaller. Her comment is, what they are doing with a chainsaw, we did with a scalpel. And we took the time to understand the consequences of our actions for the American people, for our employees, and for the efficiency of our federal government. They're not doing that.
Any other questions? Yes.
What would you say to those HHS employees who are facing cuts due to RFK and some of the anxieties that they may be having, as they're watching this program and hearing about this?
Yeah, I'll say these cuts, we believe these cuts are illegal. We believe these cuts are bad for the American people, and they risk our safety and they risk our health. And so I think doing that to our agencies right now is terrible, but the HHS in particular does cancer research. It does critical research to keep our communities safe and our country safe. And this is going to have a terrible impact on not just HHS employees, but all Americans.